Sky Guardian, you share that it's time to read from another section of the Vachanamrut. I agree. Yes, let's do so. This is a text which has been given to me by Sky Guardian. It serves as the Bible of sorts for a certain spiritual organization known as the BAPS. They are kind of a lineage that can be considered a part of Hinduism, although as we heard in our reading today earlier, what might be called as Hinduism is more of a way of life that has arisen around the region of Bharat. It might be called a sampradaya, a lineage of the eternal path that we are all on. Anyway, the main character, the protagonist of the Vachanamrut, is known as Sriji Maharaj, also known as Swami Narayan, who is said to be a divine being that came here on earth within the last few hundred years, in the turn of the 19th century or the 18th century. 19th century. Today we are reading Gadhadā 125. On the morning of Posh Sudhi the 7th, Samvat 1876, or the 23rd of December 1819, Sriji Maharaj arrived at the residence of the Paramahansas, great beings in Dada Kachar's Darbar in Gadhadā. He was wearing a white case and had covered himself with a thick white cotton cloth. He had also tied a white fato around his head. He was sitting facing east on the western veranda. At that time, Paramahansas, as well as devotees from various places, had gathered before him. By the way, the title of today's reading is The Flow of 20 Pails of Water. Thereupon, Sriji Maharaj said, out of compassion, "A devotee of that source, God, who observes only Swadharma, the highest righteousness, does not feel completely fulfilled within their heart. That feeling of fulfillment can only be attained by Atma, self-realization, and the knowledge of God's glory. Moreover, the extent of the deficiency in these two attributes determines the extent of the deficiency in their experience of fulfillment. Therefore, a devotee of God should firmly cultivate these two qualities. Moreover, the extent of the deficiency remaining in these two factors also determines the extent of the hindrances experienced during Samadhi, a kind of absorption reached through meditation. Recently, I granted Samadhi to a devotee in which she saw intense divine light. Seeing that light, she began to scream. She shouted, 'I'm burning!' Therefore, even those who experience Samadhi require Atma, self-realization. If one does not realize one's own self to be the Atma, and instead believe oneself to be the body, much deficiency will remain. I explained to that devotee, yourself is the Atma. Not the body. You are not this Lad Gibhai of the Bhat community. Rather, yourself is the Atma, which is unpierceable and uncuttable. I then placed her into Samadhi again and told her, go to the 4-petaled lotus at the site of Ganapati and behold your own self there. When a person in Samadhi enters the site of Ganapati, that person hears divine sounds and sees divine light. When they enter the higher site of Brahma, they hear louder sounds and see brighter light. When they enter still the higher site of Vishnu, by the way, that first site of Brahma refers to the Creator. Here the site of Vishnu refers to the Pervader or the Preserver. They hear even louder sounds and see even brighter light. In this manner, as they enter higher and higher locations, they hear increasingly louder sounds and see increasingly brighter light. As a result of the intense divine light seen in that Samadhi and the loud thunderous sounds that occur, even the most resolute become timid. For example, despite being a devotee of God and despite being extremely brave, Arjuna was still incapable of beholding God's Vishvarup form, their cosmic form. He therefore pleaded, "O Maharaj, I am incapable of beholding this form of yours. Please grant me darshan, sight, of your former form." Similarly, in Samadhi, when thunderous noises or thundering noises like those of an entire Brahmanda, entire universe exploding are heard, and masses of intense light are overflowing, like overflowing oceans are seen, even the brave lose their patience. Therefore, one should understand one's own self to be distinct from the body. Samadhi, experienced in this manner, is achieved in 2 ways. One is by controlling the pranas, the vital energies, through pranayama, breath control, whereby the citta is also controlled, the consciousness. The other is by controlling the citta, whereby the pranas are also controlled. When is control over the citta achieved? It is achieved when one's vrittis, their focus from everything else, is detached and focused only on God. However, these vrittis can be focused on God only when desires for everything else are overcome, and only a singular desire for the form of God remains. Thereafter, those vrittis will not be deflected from God's form by any means whatsoever. For example, if 20 pails of water are drawn from a well, and the flow of water from each pail allowed to flow in separate directions, then there would be little force in each flow. However, if the flow of all 20 pails of water are combined, then the resultant flow would become extremely powerful, like that of a river, and would not be able to be diverted by any means whatsoever. Similarly, when a person's vrittis have become free of worldly desires, their citta focuses only on God's form. Conversely, when a person has desires in their citta for the pleasures of the world, their vritti is widely dispersed among countless types of sounds via the ears. Similarly, via the skin, the vritti is dispersed among thousands of different types of touch sensations. The vritti of the eyes is dispersed among thousands of different types of things to see. The vritti of the tongue is dispersed among thousands of different types of tastes, and the vritti of the nose is dispersed among countless types of smells. In the same manner, the vrittis of their karma indriyas, their sense organs of action, of locomotion, are dispersed among their respective vishais, experiences of the senses, in thousands of different ways. In this ways, via the 10 indriyas, the 10 senses, sense organs, their antakaran, their whole mind is dispersed in thousands of different ways. Only when their citta, mind or consciousness, contemplates on God, and their mana, their mind, generates thoughts of God, and their buddhi, their intellect, establishes the conviction of God, and their ahamkar, their ego, harbors the consciousness, I am the Atma, the true self, the soul, and a devotee of God, can their desire for God be known to have become singular. Alternatively, the control of the citta, by controlling the pranas, the vital breath or energies, is achieved by Ashtanga Yoga, the eightfold yoga system, the 8 limbs of yoga, which comprises of 8 stages: yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dhyana, dharana, and samadhi. This Ashtanga Yoga is a means, and its fruit is the nirvikalpa samadhi, the formless absorption of God. When this nirvikalpa samadhi is achieved, the citta is controlled by controlling the pranas. On the other hand, if the citta focuses on God after becoming free of worldly desires, then the pranas are controlled by control of the citta. Therefore, just as the citta is controlled by mastering Ashtanga Yoga, similarly, the citta can also be controlled by focusing on the form of God. A devotee whose citta's vritti, the focus of consciousness, becomes focused on the form of God, masters Ashtanga Yoga without even attempting to master it. Therefore, the spiritual endeavors of Atma, self-realization, and the knowledge of God's glory that I have just described should be firmly practiced. Furthermore, one's religious vows, which are God's injunctions, should certainly be observed. For example, the dharma, the righteousness of a brahmin, of a spiritually minded kind of person who is religious in nature, is to bathe, lead a pure life, and never drink even water from a Shudra's house, from a laborer's house. Similarly, a satsangi, a participant in satsang, of a true gathering of spiritual people, should never falter in observing God's injunctions. Why? Because God will be pleased with them if they behave accordingly. Moreover, a person should very firmly maintain both the knowledge of God's glory as well as the knowledge of the Atma, the Self, coupled with vairagya, dispassion. They should also feel fulfilled by realizing, now I have no deficiencies remaining. With this understanding, they should constantly offer bhakti, devotion, to that source God. Having said this, though, they should not be carried away in the elation of this understanding, nor should they feel unfulfilled. If they do feel unfulfilled, then the blessings that have been showered upon them by that source God can be considered as not having germinated, like a seed sown in saline soil. Conversely, if they get carried away and begin to behave waywardly, then that is like having thrown a seed into a fire, which burns it. Therefore, if one understands as I have explained, then no form of deficiency will remain whatsoever. After saying this, Sriji Maharaj returned to his seat. Thus we end Gadhadā 125. The flow of 20 pails of water, which, if we may reflect back on again for a moment, 20 pails of water flowing in different directions, they will each be but a trickle, and each one easily diverted. But 20 pails of water poured in the same direction, now that is a mighty force, hard to divert. Similarly, we should direct all of our senses towards that divine source, trying to see God, hear God, taste God, smell God, feel God, in everything that we do. How do we do that? With the right knowledge that God is manifest as everything. There is nothing undivine in this world. And 20 is such a specific number, says G to infinity. I assume that number was chosen in reference to the 5 senses of knowledge, the jnana, what are they called? The jnana indriyas, and the 5 senses of action, the karma indriyas. I forget exactly what they are, but they're the organs of digestion and moving and speaking, etc. So we should also try to eat God, move like God, and speak only God, that kind of thing as well. In everything that we do, both in our senses of understanding and our senses of action.